Hi, this is Billy Cobham, and I'm in Coluna Blues Rock.
Thanks. Mr. Cobham, you were born in Panama, right?
Yes.
And live until 3 years, almost. 3-4 years.
Yes, I left when I was 3.5 years old.
Yeah. Do you remember the local music? Because Latin countries have a strong tradition percussion.
Yeah.
Do you think your percussion life was born in Panama?
Absolutely. And that's what the basis of my music now.
Yeah.
When you see my band, the band, my own band, one of the bands actually, I have two. That band has a steel pan player in it. And a Brazilian, actually a guy by the name of Marco Lobo, who lives in Salvador, and whom I found playing with Milton. And it's been 10 years. It's all part of my section.
Soon after, in 1947, you and your family moved to Harlem, New York, right?
In Harlem, New York City.
Yeah. At that time, jazz was the style prevailing in the neighborhood, right? At that time, was bebop jazz or the cool jazz?
I was 3 years old, man. I don't know.
Yeah.
I was only 3.
Yeah.
All of it sound like music to me.
Okay. As early as '69, you joined the Miles Davis band.
Yeah.
How was the relationship with the guy who took jazz and expanded to the unimaginable?
Strange. But good. Somehow it worked.
Soon after you found the Mahavishnu Orchestra with the magnificent John McLaughlin.
Okay.
I love John. And the others great musicians. Did you meet him during the Miles Davis period? And could you talk a little about the formation of Mahavishnu?
I met John McLaughlin in England.
In England.
I was working with Horace Silver in 1968. And that's the first encounter I had with him. Who was he working with? He had a band with another drummer named Tony Oxley, who's passed away. Great jazz player, who used to play with Bill Evans, the great Bill Evans pianist. Anyway, then after that, McLaughlin moved to the United States and started working with Tony Williams. I didn't meet him while I was working with Miles. Although he was in the studio, there were too many things going on and too many people. And if you can imagine going into a recording studio to make a recording and you see people whom you've heard perform on record, who you love to hear their music, just piano alone, was Keith Jarrett, Joe Zavinu, Chick Corea, Larry Young on organ, and then out of nowhere the door opens and there's Herbie Hancock. 5 piano players in the same room playing on the same recording.
Yeah.
And those were the Vicious Brew sessions. You never knew people were just there, just keyboards. Then you had McLaughlin, who played, thank God there was only one guitar player. Because later on there was George Benson or there was Larry Coryell. Miles had a lot of different people. 2 bass players, Harvey Brooks, electric bass, Ron Carter, upright bass. Maybe me and Tony drums, or me and Jack drums, or me and Lenny White drums.
Yeah.
It just went like this. And he just pointed to people and you would play. Because he wanted you to contribute what you heard, what you experienced from everybody else. So all kinds of people would be there. Benny Maupin, bass clarinet or tenor saxophone. I was not in the studio at all with Wayne Shorter. I never had the honor. But there was Benny, there was Steve Grossman, tenor sax. Who else? I know Alirio Lima, from percussionist from Brazil. Badal Roy Chowdhury, Indian tabla player. Ayrton Moreira was there. All these people all at the same time in this room that was not that big, man. So we smelled terrible, and it was like good to open the door. But anyway.
I think Birds of Fire from Mahavishnu is one of the important albums of music, not jazz or rock music. You know?
Thank you.
Yeah. A melting pot of styles with fantastic musicians. Could you talk a little specifically on the disc about Birds of Fire?
It came out of Inner Mounting Flame. Inner Mounting Flame was the first record we made.
Yeah.
It was, all of this music was, what's the word? No one knew. I shouldn't say no one. I didn't know. Nor was I really interested in what the music meant to anybody else. I liked it, so I was playing it. And it felt very comfortable to me. It had certain qualities and virtues that I felt I needed to develop to become more comfortable with. One quality was playing rhythms that were 5/4, 1 2 3 4 5, 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, but odd, where every meter, every bar was different. So the overall, it was like sub phrases, and then it made one big phrase. And I really did not feel as comfortable before I started working in that environment doing that. I had some experiences with Herbie Hancock that in his band, subbing for Tootie Heath, I think, and I thought I made a big mess of the music because I just couldn't feel comfortable because I didn't have the security in here that I could do it. And so I was playing tentative, and I wanted to practice more. And so when John approached me about working with him on some new music, it wasn't with the intent of joining a band. It was just he had some ideas, and he needed a drummer or somebody to help him realize these ideas. So he took a rehearsal room. At that time you could rehearse in a place maybe for $10 a day or so, and you just practice, and that was it. Because in New York City there were many industrial buildings there was nothing in them, and they were just kind of losing money for the owner. So whatever price he could get for rental for the day, or what it would be, $50, sure. And so we would go and play for hours. Sometimes, well, in the beginning of the orchestra project, I think John and I rehearsed. It was good to say for about 2 weeks alone, every day, right through, 14 days straight. Just, I have something else I want to try. Okay, and I would just go. I was young, unattached, could just. I could walk to rehearsals sometimes and just play. And in this way, it developed something in me, and I became more and more comfortable with playing these patterns. Next thing you know, what do you think of, we can add a bass player? Who? He had ideas. Rick Laird eventually came. Jerry Goodman eventually came. Before Rick Laird came, Jerry Goodman came. And we made a recording with Charlie Hayden, very famous bassist who's passed away now, used to work with Ornette Coleman, called My Goals Beyond. And that was a John McLaughlin album that was on Douglas Records. And that's how I first recorded with John. And from there, things started to open up and we became this band. I didn't even know that John was associated with a guru or anything. It was just all about the music for me. I didn't care, it's his business. But I understood where he was getting his inspiration from. And it made a lot of sense. I mean, musically it was like, wow, man, yeah. It's in a different way. The Indian music approach, but really focusing on something like that more. Okay. It's good for him. It's great to add a Panamanian Latin approach to it was even more interesting for me.
And by the way, thank you so much for signing my Mahavishnu discos,
no
man.
No
I love Mahavishnu,
okay.
Really. And I'm with a Miles t-shirt, Live Evil.
Wow.
Yeah,
wow.
I love that shirt.
Wow.
I love that disco.
Okay.
Your debut album, Spectrum, was amazing, man.
Right.
Had a amount of rock punch, and the original idea was to make it a heavier disc, or it just happened after the entry of Tommy Bolin?
Well, you see, the way that record came about was out of desperation. I had to figure out, because I knew that I was not going to be in the band with Mahavishnu before I made that record. I knew that those were my last months in the band. Yeah. And I knew that I would be on my own, have to try to find a way to work for myself. So I decided to play, to write some songs. I mean, what do I do? How can I help myself? I need a manager, but you don't go to people asking them to help you without something in return. You have to help you with what? What do you want to do? Yes, you play the drums. Drummers at the time, very rare to lead a band.
Yeah.
So, what do you have to offer? These are the questions I asked myself. Yeah. So I thought, maybe I can just anything. And that started to come, and I just started to write just around that. Next thing you know, I had this piece called Red Baron. Next thing you know, I had a piece called Stratus. And it was all coming from here. When I say heart, I'm talking about this is all I know. This is what I would do. And the marketing point was, I was playing in a band, we were playing all of this complicated stuff, and here I come, drummer that played that stuff. People are not stupid. Billy Cobham from Mahavishnu Orchestra, this is his record. What? No, can't be. He's known for all these complicated patterns. But this makes me tap my feet. So why is that? It's because that's home. That's home to most of the people in this world. If you can make them, they don't tap their feet to, no, it's too much angst, too much stress. Yeah, it's technically fantastic. And that's for the intelligentsia who sit there and go, wow, it's incredible, you know what you can do, and they can analyze all of this. But the intelligentsia are in the minority. The majority wants this. So I sold 2 million records.
And sometimes in the Spectrum, man, it's heavy metal, you know. It's yeah, I
But it's
love.
for the masses.
Yeah.
It's for the majority of the people.
Yeah.
And that's what the people are into. Then and now. You know, so when you hear us playing music that is what I call cerebral, very brainy, brain food, it's fundamentally because that's where we're really thinking. But out of that comes cool LL Cool J, some hip hop, whatever, and they sell a lot of records because that's what the people really want and feel comfortable listening to and working with.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
Speaking of bowling, this guy who still had much to give to rock and roll, and I guess he did not receive the due respect. Do you agree?
Oh, no. He didn't receive the respect. The problem with Tommy is just that he wasn't destined to live so long.
Yeah.
Same thing with Amy Winehouse. Do you understand? And the same thing with Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
3 people died at the age of 27.
Morrison too.
Yeah.
Jim Morrison.
27.
Yeah.
Always the age of 27. What is with this number? Yeah, it's very interesting. And you start to go, why such geniuses? And they only live for 27 years and then
I
they're
think
gone.
Robert Johnson too, right?
Can be.
Yeah.
Can be. Many people died at 27 who left a mark.
Yeah.
Incredible. And Tommy was one.
So sad, right? He was a talented
Yeah,
guitarist.
I accepted it after, you first initially go, oh, it's, and then you realize it was his time.
Yeah.
And what can we say, it's, sometimes to make that impact, for instance, when Hendrix left, there was a vacuum of guitarists. There was no one, in my opinion, that could even come close. And I know Hendrix from rhythm guitar player, where he just played unbelievable. I mean, he's rhythm, and you just want to, you couldn't stop moving, and it was like he had a switch. The switch was this.
Yeah.
Not too many people can do that, And when he left, there was a scramble, and the person that ended up filling that void was John McLaughlin, playing a completely different kind of feeling. Yet at the same time, John had a way of playing grooves, man.
Yeah.
If he wanted to, he'd make you get up and dance. Yeah. And whether it be on bass with a pick or just playing guitar, with grooving. Not too many people can do that.
Yeah, and because about John, his guitar sounds like a chaos, but so beautiful, It's beautiful.
He's a bit of a genius.
Yeah, exactly. And how did it started your partnership with George Duke? Man, you did a hell of funk, I love that partnership.
Yeah, it was great. It lasted a short time, but again, it was only needed for a certain amount of time, so that's why we never moved forward. It was just, hey, he played on the Crosswinds album, and he made a recording on that record that actually it's called Heather, and it's got an incredible story. I mean, what the solo he played was like this crying. It was just lament. Lament is a great word, because that was done in 1974. Okay, Crosswinds. Now, that song Heather, I wrote in the city of Hiroshima, Japan, sitting next to the atomic dome where the first atomic bomb exploded.
Yeah.
There's still, to this day, radioactivity there. And I was sitting next to, on the bench like this, or longer, but that bench had been there. It hadn't been changed. It didn't go away. And on the bench is a dark, looks like a human shadow. And that's the shadow of someone who was sitting on the bench when that bomb blew up. And that shadow was there, came off the floor, and that was a person at one point. And you sit there and you get this feeling, So I wrote this piece. Fast forward to the tsunami of Sendai. Someone, for some reason I did not know, it was brought to my attention, took that song without knowing that I wrote it in Hiroshima and put the music to the footage coming from the tsunami, taking away all the truck, the boats and everything moving inland. And it was on YouTube, and that's how I found it. It was amazing. Yeah, and that was, let's say tsunami was 2008, maybe?
Around
there?
Yeah.
Incredible. And I still don't know who did this. They edited it and put it out, and I had nothing to do with it. It's just amazing, man.
I'm a big Grateful Dead fan, and I didn't know, but you played with
Yeah, I
Dave.
was with
How was that partnership? I really didn't know about that.
It was hilarious. It was fun. I just friends with Jerry Garcia, and so it was First it was Bobby and the Midnights, and we were the spin-off band of the Grateful Dead himself. The Garcia band. Garcia had his own band with.
Yeah.
Oh man, I can't remember his name. Greg Errico was the drummer in the band for a minute, and that was one band. It was a great blues band. And then there was Bob Ware had another band, and that was Bobby and the Midnights, and I was in that band with Alfonso Johnson. Sometimes Kenny. I can't remember his name now. From it's too early, and I'm too old. Too much information. But so many people. So we had such fun playing, working just as a very loose group, you know. It's like, and then after that, we got something a little bit more serious, which is more of a challenge. It was it's called Jazz is Dead, which was really funny. How you doing? And it had to do with who was in the band? It was the music of the Grateful Dead, but only the most difficult things they wrote that they rarely ever played, like Franklin's Tower.
I love that
like
song
this.
from Blues for Our Life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of stuff like this we would play with Jimmy Herring, guitar, the late T. Lavitz on keyboards, and Jeff Berlin. No, not was Jeff in the band? No, Jeff wasn't in the band. Was Alfonso Johnson was the bass player, and we were a quartet, and we would play only the most difficult things that they didn't like to play, and we just made it, rehearsed it, and went on the road with it, and we had a great time playing that stuff. It's great material, great repertoire. Good question.
At the Miles Davis period, you played with two great Brazilian musicians, Ayrton Moreira, of course, and Hermeto Pascoal.
Hermeto, and there was another one.
Who?
Alirio Lima.
Oh yeah, I didn't know. Yeah, could you talk a little bit about each one? Because Miles Davis was completely crazy about Hermeto Pascoal.
Yeah, sure. Because Hermeto was the only person that we ever saw in a swimming pool making music by slapping the water. Said, what? No. You know, I said, can't be serious. Yeah, it is.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And Ayrton's Ayrton. He's a shaman. He's incredible, you know.
Yeah.
Alirio, you just never knew with him what was going to happen next. And that was important. With Miles, the elements of not surprise, but you could not, in the music, know what was going to happen unless you were someone who was kind of clairvoyant. All these people together, everyone's thinking, and they're not thinking to be competitive. They're thinking to be contributors.
Yeah.
It's not so easy. It's something that is tremendously rare in improvisational music, where things work, because some people don't play. Can you imagine 5 keyboard players and 3 of them are not playing because they don't feel there's no need to put anything else in. It's there already, so they're just listening as audience. Here's an interesting. There's a band called Snarky Puppy. It's an young American. I don't know where to place it. It's not jazz. It's not fusion. It's great It's just great pop, but they can play. They're from, I guess, Tennessee, somewhere. They can play. And they have in their band, they enlist the audience. They get people on stage and they give them headphones. And then they play and they sit there. Their job is to sit down and listen. That's all. 10 people, the band's maybe 10 people, and then you have people sitting around on chairs with headphones. And the band's and all of a sudden all the heads are going like this. And then all the people in the audience start to go like this. It's perfect. Perfect. I love it, you know.
Yeah.
And that used to happen with us.
Yeah.
It's just like, you know, people just, some of the musicians would just be going, nothing's happening. They forgot to play because everything else is happening, you know. So you don't need me, you know. And then all of a sudden, ping, one little note that makes the difference. That's what's happening.
Musician like that was Frank Zappa, right? He was a composer, maestro, completely genius, right? Because some musicians talked about him. Yeah, sometimes I only played one note, bang, and then xylophone or vibraphone, bang, and then the guitar. And it's too crazy, right?
Well, the thing is that he wrote these things. There's a difference. He wrote these things and they rehearsed incessantly this stuff. It was all set. But can you imagine not having it written?
Yeah.
And somebody just sitting there like this, and then all of a sudden, da 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 da, and it worked, and that's where it fit. And then don't play anymore.
Yeah.
Change the sound to something else. You hear something else. That's really amazing. And not that Frank's stuff is less. It's just a different route he took. Everything was on a piece of paper. It's amazing.